Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very empowering show coming right up with special guest, Dr. Martha Seidelmann, and she's here today to share with us her new book, The Book of Beasties, your A to Z guide to the illuminating wisdom of spirit animals. Now, Dr. Martha was a fourth-generation physician living in a nature-starved, hectic lifestyle until a walrus entered her life and changed everything. She's a shamanic healer and is trained with Michael Harner's Foundation for Shamanic Studies, and she's also a master coach and instructor trained at the Martha Beck Institute. Dr. Martha deeply enjoys shenanagins, and she has led sold-out retreats that combine surfing and shamanism in Hawaii and a sacred pilgrimage to Thailand. She loves to help others find their own feel-good so that they can courageously and enthusiastically live. She's also a frequent guest blogger at Maria Shriver's site, Architects of Change. So let's welcome to the show, Dr. Martha Seidelmann.
Thank you, Marianne. Glad to be here.
Oh, what a joy it is to have you here. And my goodness, I love the Book of Beasties, and you've had several other just profound books. And I could not wait to have you on the show to talk about this and also about your transformation.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really, really happy about the way that the Book of Beasties turned out. I mean, the illustrations, and it's just, they did an incredible job. It was a beautiful collaboration.
Well, and so why don't you share with our listeners that are new to your story, how you went from being a doctor to a shaman who talks and communicates with animals?
Sure. And I always like to say I don't call myself a shaman. We say in these circles that, that's sort of maybe not good practice, but I call myself a practitioner of this work. But yes, let me go back. So about 8-9 years ago, and maybe a few, 10 years ago, if we go back in time, I was just working at the hospital as a pathologist, which is I was a disease hunter. That was my job, is to sit behind my microscope and, ferret out disease or rule out disease in the case where nothing was going on, to let them know that, let the other doctors know that. And I started feeling more disconnected with what I was doing, and just dissatisfied, kind of unhappy at work. Which led to, I hired a life coach, which really helped me a lot to at least begin to enjoy my work a little bit more. And I talk about that in one of my books, just about that process. But eventually what it led to was taking a sabbatical. So I took a 3-month sabbatical from work, just hoping to find whatever it was that was missing. There just seemed to be something that wasn't quite right about my life. And that summer, I ended up spending a lot more time outdoors in the wild, kind of on these trails near our house. And there I began to feel a lot better. And that summer I stumbled into this ancient idea that, that nature, and in particular wild animals, have messages for us and wisdom to share with us. And if we would listen to that wisdom, we might be able to live our life, to create a beautiful life and to avoid difficulty and maybe find ease and comfort. And I was like, wow, sounds like the strangest idea. I mean, being a board-certified pathologist, I was like, that doesn't sound logical. Nobody's ever told me that animals have messages for us. But being an animal lover and kind of as a kid was just obsessed with, wild animals and shows about them, I thought, well, this sounds kind of fun. And I was really desperate because by the time I was on my sabbatical, I realized I didn't want to go back to work. But it was pretty scary because it's like, I better go back to work because, we're relying on my income and all that good stuff. So anyway, that's how it started for me. So I began to play with this idea, do wild animals, could they possibly have messages for me that were helpful? And I stumbled into the first major beastie I'll just talk about. I stumbled into this taxidermied walrus on the wall at the shop in our downtown, which, so for listeners, if you're wondering, does it have to be a wild animal that actually crosses your path? Not necessarily. They can show up in many different ways in your dreams, in objects people gift to you. Maybe in your Facebook feed, you're seeing a lot of hyenas or some kind of beastie. Anyway, for me, it was this walrus. And I was really just really taken by it, and I couldn't quite figure it out. And I was like, okay, let me think what would possibly be the message. So I did a little research about walruses, and after watching some footage of them on YouTube, I was like, wow, walruses are pretty relaxed, Like they're laying on the beach just like, they're pretty mellow creatures. And they're kind of just being walruses. They're not attempting to be something they aren't. They're not trying to be a butterfly. They're not trying to be a tiger. They're just kind of like lollygagging on the beach and, just following their instincts. And then the other thing about them is they're apex predators, meaning they have no competition, essentially. Rarely like a polar bear will give them trouble, but for the most part, they live kind of unchallenged. So I put those two things together, and I thought, well, maybe if I could find a new vocation, I would have no competition if I could just manage to relax and be Sarah, like be myself, the way these walruses seem to know how to be themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that was sort of the beginning of the adventure, yeah.
Oh, what a beautiful story, because, I mean, you look at these animals, and a lot of times people cannot make the connection for what they're trying to tell us. Do you think, is that kind of like one of the number one reasons people come to you? It's like, gosh, I feel like I should be able to connect to these animals or these messages, and I'm not, and they're kind of trying to work through their blocks?
Yeah, I think a lot of people who come to me are wanting, like maybe I was 8 or 10 years ago, to learn how to navigate their life more with heart or with their intuition, we might say. Because they've either come to the point in their life, a crossroads in their life, where they're unable to navigate it the way they used to, with logic or reason or, kind of taking outside advice, that kind of thing. And suddenly they realize the only way forward is going to have to be this hard way, this hard new way, which is actually eventually an easier way, but at first it seems kind of confusing. And so, yeah, I help a lot of people to discover who their personal spirit animal is, and then how to connect to them and to get the wisdom that they need to step forward in their life, to do the things that they came here to do, whether that's, creatively or, with, their relationships, everything.
Well, and it would seem, because I've heard different talks that you've given, and, of course I've got your beautiful book, which I adore, and it seems that when we're open to these connections with animals, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we really get kind of these profound messages that can impact our life in great ways.
Absolutely. And sometimes it can be very simple. Maybe I'll just kind of outline so if you're listening and you're curious as to how do I get messages from these animals, a really simple way would be today is just to, think about something that's been bothering you. Maybe it's something with work. Maybe it's something with one of your kids or a loved one. And just ask yourself, okay, what's the thing that I'm struggling with? And then just notice who shows up. What wild animal do you notice today? Maybe you actually, maybe there are crows in your yard, or maybe you see a lot of videos of hedgehogs today on Facebook, or maybe you had a dream of an animal. And then you're just going to ask yourself the simple question, if this is a kind universe, what might this particular animal be trying to tell me? And it might be the way they're behaving. Are they sleeping and relaxing? Is that part of the message for you? Are they like, I remember years ago when I was really scared about leaving my job and just so much upheaval in my life, and I stumbled into the honey badger, which was just hilarious. I don't know how many people have listened to it, but very hilarious and salty video that was sort of a nature documentary video that was spoofed by a really funny narrator named Randall. And I remember watching that video, and it was so powerful because this honey badger was absolutely fearless. I mean, it was diving into these caves underground filled with bees, and the bees were stinging the honey badger, but it didn't care. Like, it wanted that honey so badly. It was willing to endure whatever challenge was going to come its way. And that was a really huge inspiring message for me because, it's not easy to go create a new vacation for yourself, or it's not easy to go find out, how to heal yourself from a traumatic relationship that you've endured for years, or, any number of things. So that's one way, but I created the book because I think when you're starting out with this kind of navigating your life this way, it can be really wonderful to have kind of a reference for those times. Maybe there are times when you really do get the message and it's easy for you to decipher, and maybe other times you're like, geez, I have no idea what this is, and I want to kind of, just consult a reference and see what this person is offering. So when I wrote the book of Beasties, I sat down and called, all the loving and compassionate Beastie spirits, kind of into a campfire circle and invited them, whoever wanted to be involved, to be part of this book and to share what medicine or what message they wanted to share. And so that's kind of where this book comes from.
Well, I found that there are a lot of little beasties in here that are not in other books, and I was really happy about that because I was able to kind of go through, and I love your story about the honey badger. I mean, who hasn't seen that video and I think it's a hoot, but that's how the honey badger is,
Yes. I know, and I think I almost thought when that came out, I thought, about 90 million people or something watched it, and I thought that's about how many of us we need to be courageous right now because, in these times there's a lot happening, a lot of change. So we need all hands on deck feeling as courageous as they can be.
Oh, my goodness, without a doubt. Well, and so I know you've talked about your own animal guide, your animal spirit. Why don't you share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah. So in my other book, Swimming with Elephants, which is a memoir, I kind of tell the story of leaving medicine to discover this other path and kind of the twists and turns of that experience. And the first beastie that I connected with as what I like to call like a core beastie, or your lifetime kind of spirit animal. So many of us will have these animals that will come and go from our lives, which I like to think of as guest species, sort of like, maybe today you see a dragonfly and it reminds you, that you have the freedom to go backwards, forwards, whatever direction you feel like, because they're navigation. But what the bear was my first introduction to a core beastie or a lifetime, an animal that's going to be working with you for a lifetime. And I met her through going on what's called a shamanic journey, which is really sort of a fancy word, but really it's essentially listening to a particular drum beat that causes you to go into a meditative state. And so I listened to this guided sort of drum journey, and I met this mother bear, and she rubbed my back, and she was like, Sarah, I was like, I'm in a panic. What do I do? I don't want to go back to work. And how are we going to do this? We need the money. I was just all filled with anxiety. And she rubbed my back, and she's just like, Sarah, where you want to go is not that far. And she sort of pointed off into the distance to where that was going to be somewhere. And she's like, all you need to do is really enjoy this journey. And kind of we went rolling down a hill together in this kind of, it's almost like a dream or a guided visualization, except for that it's sort of being guided by the spirits. And for those of, anybody who's listening who's curious and would like to do this, go on a journey, discover their core beastie, you can go to my website, followyourfeelgood.com, and if you subscribe there, there's a journey that will be sent to you. And then, so Mother Bear and I began to work, and I kept going back to visit her for guidance and for kind of just to receive her love and compassion, because really that's what the spirit animals really share with us, the love and compassion of the universe, which might sound kind of strange, but this is one of those things I just invite you to give it a try and see what you discover by going on that meditation. But then as it was getting closer and closer time for me to go back to work, I was getting more and more progressively nervous, like, oh no, I don't want to go back. And eventually decided I was not going to go back. I was going to go back just very casually. So if my practice partners needed me, I was going to come into work. Around that time, that's when Alice, this beautiful elephant, showed up in my journeys, and she was really funny and a little like the honey badger in that she sort of encouraged me to have a reckless disregard for what other people thought of me, which was a really good thing, because you can imagine, you're a physician in your community, and people are like, okay, you're on sabbatical, but aren't you going back to work? And what are you doing now? It was really hard for me to explain to people. I'm listening to messages of wild animals, and I'm loving it. And at first, I really didn't even have the words to show that because it just felt so totally different than the life I had been living before. And it took a while to have the courage to kind of share that with others. So Alice, also gave me a lot of lessons too, just about connection, and she showed me, I talk in the book Swimming with Elephants, she really showed me how I belong in this world. And I think a lot of us who have gone through something extremely difficult, we tend to feel very separate, and we tend to isolate ourselves and feel like something's terribly wrong with us and that somehow we don't fit in. But what Alice and other elephants came to show me was that I belonged here and that I had work to do.
Well, and I love how in your stories you talk about how, during this journey that you've taken and the communications that you've had with these animals and the connections, that you've really learned not just where your place is, but it's okay to be unique and that we should embrace our uniqueness. And I love that because a lot of times everyone's trying, especially in today's age, where we're Instagrammed out and everyone has to look like, something that's really not normally obtainable, and nor should we want to. That we're all trying to look like something instead of looking like ourselves.
Yeah. Each animal is unbelievably unique, and the beauty of this sort of this kind of way of looking at the world, that this kind of what we've been talking about really helps, is that every single animal belongs here, every single creature from ladybug, even into mythical creatures like unicorn. Just because you haven't seen one does not mean that it does not exist, and that each one of these species, it belongs here, and without one of them, the whole system kind of loses out. And I think that's also goes the same thing for humans, that, we are all much needed here, and everybody has a place on the circle. And especially what we need is each one of us to play out our uniqueness and to share that with everybody. And there's a lot of messages we receive in school and as we grow up about conforming and playing to the rules and behaving in a way that will make others proud or whatever it is. But again, you get to a certain point in your life where you realize you can no longer be shackled by that anymore, and you long for freedom, and freedom to be yourself, to express who you really are. And that's why I think the Beasties can really give us that courage, because once you connect with who your core Beastie is, again, I'll go back to that, they can really help you to own your uniqueness and really stand in your own power. I'll just give a real brief example from kind of a story from my own life. We were, for a couple of years, I had a podcast about animal spirits and just messages from wild animals that people were receiving. And a woman called in and she said, I kind of think my core Beastie is a bear, but I don't want it to be. They're terrible, And we were like, well, tell us more. Like, why are bears terrible? And she told us the story about watching this movie where the mother bear, the young cubs were about 1 year old, and it was time for her to separate and move on because she was done raising them. So she chased them up this tree very ferociously and then trotted off. And the babies were crying, and they came back down the tree, these cubs, these yearling cubs, and she just ferociously growled at them and chased them back up the tree. And the reason the mother bears do this is because bears are raised up to be independent. Bears don't live in clans or tribes. They live solo, so they need to learn how to fish, hunt, take care of themselves completely. And, my podcast co-pilot reminded this person that, the mother bear doesn't leave the bears until they're ready, her children until they're ready to take care of business. And what that reminded me is that, I sometimes like to compare myself to other people and their mothering styles. I like my kids to be pretty independent. So when they were like 5, I was having them unload the dishwasher. And I remember sometimes other mothers would kind of look at me funny when I would say that. Because I was like, well, I'm training them to do this, And it's okay. Like, I just realized, some like Wolf, if maybe your core beastie is a wolf, you might really indulge your young ones, because wolves do that. They're very indulgent because they live in packs. They don't need that absolute independence. So, and we need all kinds of mothers. We need all kinds of, to raise all kinds of different people. And so anyway, that was one way I learned how, through this bear, to celebrate my parenting style and how I do things, that it's okay.
I love how you've taken inspiration from the messages that you've gotten from the animals, because I think a lot of times people hear, they'll get a message and be like, oh, that can't be it. No, I don't know about that.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been talking with Dr. Sarah Seidelmann in regards to her new book, The Book of Beasties. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed, and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 123 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
There are nearly 2 million Americans living with amputation. Many live right here in San Antonio. Becoming an amputee can be scary, frustrating, isolating, but there's no reason to feel alone. The San Antonio Amputee Foundation is here to help support you and guide you toward resources such as home and car modifications and even prosthetic limbs. For more information or to make a donation, visit saamputee.org. We'll help you live a full, active life, one step at a time. San Antonio Amputee Foundation, healing limbs, hearts, and souls.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with special guest, Dr. Sarah Seidelmann, and she's sharing with us her new book, The Book of Beasties, your A to Z guide to illuminating wisdom of spirit animals. Now, Dr. Sarah, before we left on break, there's a story that you had actually talked about in your book, and I've heard you talk about it before in some of the other talks you've done. I'd love for you to share it with us. It's the story of the black mamba snake. I'd love for you to share that with us.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sometimes animals show up that we don't really want to hear from. And so, yeah, I call that sort of like shadow totems, or sort of like looking at the dark side of things. And those are frequently things like sharks, bats, spiders, snakes, people, something like a beastie that maybe is showing up that like really disgusts you or really frightens you. Those are good ones to look at when you're ready. Like I always tell people, nobody's going to force you to look at these things, but it might be really helpful. And you don't have to, you can sort of just gently do it. So you might, I talk about this black mamba, which is a viper, a snake in South Africa. That's pretty much, their bite is universally lethal unless you have, the antivenom around. So they're very feared there, and I really didn't want to deal with this message from the black mamba, but somehow I knew that it was important. So a few months after she first showed up in my life, I decided to look at her and kind of explore. And how I did that, and so if you've got beasties that are showing up that are kind of going, you're like, I just don't want to get this message, whatever it is, I'm not interested, is maybe to just learn a little bit more about that creature somehow. Maybe watch some National Geographic video about them, maybe look up the mythology. Maybe there are stories, ancient stories from different cultures that you could read, and just explore a little bit more about what they're all about. And that helped me with Black Mamba because, I could see that they were very powerful, they were very beautiful, they were very elegant. And eventually I did go meet that Black Mamba on a shamanic journey. So I listened to, again, that drumming, and helped me I brought my mother bear along with me, though, because there was no way I was going to go on that trip alone. This mamba had a really powerful message for me, and it was that I couldn't just sit on my couch and manifest a new job, a new way of finding my way, and I wasn't going to find my way by just sitting back passively. I was going to have to get up and dance, and I was going to have to get up and take risks. I was going to have to put myself out there. And that really wasn't fun because, I was sitting there like hoping somebody would call me and recognize, wow, you need a new job and we've got this really, but that wasn't going to happen. I think we all fantasize that somehow the phone call is going to come or somebody's going to recognize what we're at, what we're good at and offer something to us. But Mamba was telling me, nope, it's time for you to get up and do this. And so I had to start, making retreats for people and offering these things that I was learning to see if they could help other people.
Yeah.
And eventually,
You can get the animals that you come across daily and look in your book, the Book of Beasties, and really it's kind of connecting with them in a deeper way, I feel. But, like the other day I saw a turtle. I actually kind of got him back off the road and on a place he should be. And so you look at, you can look it up, and there's so much meaning to it that I really appreciate that because you really go into like the chakra and you bring it all together so that people can really have a deeper understanding of the message the animal's trying to bring us.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different ways to play with it. So like each beastie has a huge 2-page section, and there's a section about vocation, like your job. There's a section about wellness. There's a section about creativity, relating, love, like if you're looking for love or maybe you're having trouble with your partner. There's individual advice from the beastie on that. I thought it would be fun if we, if it would be okay with you to like just pretend that we're all together here, whoever's listening, and to just pick out a beastie to come to us to give us a message.
Oh, I love
and
that.
I can just read part of the message. Yeah. So let's all set our intention that we're going to get a beastie that we all can benefit from right now in our lives, whatever's going on in it. And I'm going to open it up. Okay. It is manatee. So I'll just read part of manatee. I won't read the whole thing. We'll see how we'll read this. This enormous and gentle seagrass-grazing beastie slowly glides in with poetic grace to remind you that you alone are the guardian of your own emotional status. The manatee's lungs are giant and long, and they run along nearly his entire length, and he can compress those with his ribs to change his buoyancy and instantly affect how high or low he rides in the water. Our own emotional status can vary from riding high to feeling terribly low, and when you recognize that you have an ability to influence those highs and lows with your conscious effort, everything changes. You can't stop the waves from coming, but you can learn how to move with them. And then, it goes on. There's much more, but so this is just one example of, how to play with manatee. And let's see what else we have. Manatee, like the practice that's described for the chakras, that manatee is associated with the heart chakra. And using calming breath to bring some manatee goodness into your heart center, you can take a long, slow breath in through your nose, and fill your lungs and hold your breath to the count of 3, and then exhale slowly through pursed lips. Repeat 3 times. So each beastie kind of has some ideas to help you connect a little deeper with that energy and, just ideas to play with, because I think what I realized is that when we're in these big transitions in our life, or we're trying to navigate something that's confusing or scary, or we really want to get it right, it can help to just really get playful with things and to just try different things, to shift our energy around stuff.
Well, and when people are receiving like messages or communications from the Beasties, what does that kind of look like? Is it kind of an intuitive thing that you kind of get that they're saying? Is it more where they're actually talking to you? Do we not even try to label it? What do you suggest?
Yeah. Well, I think everybody's really different. I think we're all born with an innate ability to know things that we don't know. You know what I mean? So we all have an innate ability to perceive what is unseen. And the only way to find out how you do that is to begin to practice these things, again, by just asking yourself what's going on in my life that's bothering me, and then, if this beastie is trying to help me and this is a loving and kind universe, which I think is an excellent premise to operate on, what might they be trying to tell me? And you might just stare at them, and maybe you hear something auditorily, like, silently, but you hear it almost like telepathically. The beastie's like, relax, take a breath, or, or maybe you get an image in your mind, like almost like a visual image of what the beastie is trying to say. Or maybe you feel a knowing in your body, you get chill bumps, or you get this warm, fuzzy feeling about something. Everybody's really different, but trust how you know. One of my teachers used to say, sometimes people just have a knowing. I think that's probably the best way. So this isn't something like, Marianne, if you and I were both staring at the same butterfly, maybe I get a message of, rest and stillness, when it lands on a leaf. And you get a totally different message, which is just that there's so much beauty in life. You wake up, open your eyes, and nobody can tell us we're right or wrong. It's just a knowing we both had. That's what the butterfly was saying to me. And so, again, these things are terribly individualized and not generic. But, again, sometimes we benefit by listening to what somebody else has to say about it. So sometimes we can be confused about it and, either consult a book like mine, or you could ask a friend, I keep seeing manatee, and like, what, and I'm struggling with my daughter going to bed at night. What do you think that might be saying to, asking a friend for their input?
Yeah.
Because, we're all interconnected and often can get help from each other.
Well, and I know you were talking, people can get their guided introduction, get help in regards to kind of feeling out what beastie is kind of their beastie, in a way they want to connect with. So that's available on your website. If they go through that and they're like, I couldn't meditate, couldn't hear anything, I still need help, do you help people kind of discover what that beastie is?
Yes, sometimes I do, and I also say if somehow you're not able to get there the first time, try again, because sometimes, the second or third time is the charm, because the beasties sometimes like to know that we're dead serious and that we are really committed to finding them and working with them. But yes, and often I'll go through a series of questions with people, when you were a young kid, is there a particular wild animal that you absolutely loved? Or maybe you had a special stuffed animal that, nobody could pry away from you as hard as they tried. Or maybe there was something extraordinary happened to you. Sometimes that can be a sign that is your core beastie. Maybe you were even attacked by an animal, and that's more unusual, but sometimes also can happen in the dreams. And you might think, well, why would my core beastie attack me in my dreams? That sounds like terrible. Like, I thought these beasties were supposed to be loving and compassionate. Yeah. Sometimes that's how they get our attention. If we're really kind of asleep at the wheel, they might do that to wake us up. And there's this thing called dismemberment, which is a real, you can look that up online, but it's sort of this ancient I don't want to say mythological, but where a person is torn to bits by the animals or by forces in order to, rebuild them, at the spiritual level. So being curious about, what animals seem to be significant in my life. I remember one time we were doing a podcast and this person called in and they're like, I cannot figure out who my core beastie is. Please help me. I did the meditation. I couldn't do it. It was really hard. And they're like, what could it be? And we were like, well, another thing you can do is look around your house, sort of act like an anthropologist, like whose core beastie might this house, who lives here? Do they have a special beastie? And then there was this pause, and then the person was like, oh my gosh. And we were all like, what? What is it? Like, well, over my mantle is this huge painting, this oil painting that I've had forever of a wolf. And he goes, I know that's my beastie, And it was just like that, again, that knowing. And these things take time. Sometimes it might take a while. It's nothing to be rushed, and in our American culture, sometimes we're like, I need to know now, like, who my core beastie is so I can step forward in my life. But it's like, it might take you some time. It might take a few months. But that's okay. It's worth it. And I also have some courses on my website too, where you can dive a little deeper into this and take a 2-hour class and really kind of get more guidance if you're interested in that.
Well, and you do other work that I'd love for you to kind of go over, because some of it was, like, there's a couple things that were a little new to me. I've heard of soul retrieval work and the importance of that, because our souls sometimes will be fragmented in past lives or maybe even in this life in certain situations. Did I get that right?
Yes. Mostly what I see, at least in the work that I've done, is mostly in this life, but that you can lose parts of yourself, through trauma and other different mechanisms. And so, shamanic healing can return those lost parts. And sometimes people who come for shamanic healing, which is really, healing the spiritual aspect of whatever's going on with a person, whether it be a physical illness or emotional distress or, confusion about their career, it can be many different things, but shamanic healing kind of gets at and heals the spiritual aspect, kind of underpinning everything that's going on. And sometimes what the spirits will recommend for a person is to have a spirit animal retrieved for them or brought back to them, because sometimes people get completely disconnected from their spirit animals. That happens. And you might say, well, why would that happen? Why would the spirit leave them? And I think that's a bit of a mystery. I mean, but I do know that spirit animals are sort of like having a friendship. It's definitely a two-way street. And so if perhaps you've been ignoring, the cries or the wisdom of your spirit animal for a long time, they may lose interest and go to work and try to help somebody else who is listening. So they sort of require care and feeding, if you will.
Well, you do other work that I was a little intrigued by, extraction and psychopump work. Can you explain what those are?
So extraction is just another thing that sometimes the spirits recommend for people. And essentially what that is where through me, the spirits help to remove anything that doesn't belong in a person's spirit. So over time in our lifetimes, we all accumulate sort of junk that doesn't belong. It could be old beliefs. It could be cultural beliefs, things that have been put on you by your family, of origin. For example, I'm just thinking like, money doesn't grow on trees or something like that. So things that just don't belong in our spirit that aren't serving us. And so that process removes those things. And then typically in a shamanic healing, you're restoring balance to a person at the level of the spirit. So either removing things that don't belong or returning something that has been lost, like, for example, the spirit animal or a soul part that has been lost. And in that way, the person ends up more full of their own power, so that they can be effective in life, so that they can feel energized, so that they can feel empowered to do what they came here to do, whether that's, write a book, whether that's raise their family, whether that's, go out in the world and create something new, whatever that is.
Well, and then the psychopomp work, that's
yes,
following their
destiny. Yes.
That one was really new. I've not heard that one before, so I was like, ooh, can't wait for us to talk about this.
Yeah. Well, the idea, and I tell some stories about this in my book, my memoir, Swimming with Elephants. So psychopomp work is where if there is a spirit that is in this reality, sometimes there are spirits that die and the person's soul does not transcend, or they don't, transcend this reality, and they stick around here. And typical examples of why that might happen might be a suicide or a sudden car accident or some other accidental death, a house fire, some situation where the person did not realize that they were dying or does not realize that they are dead, if that makes sense. And so often they're this suffering spirit that's kind of wandering around. That might be what we call a ghost. If you hear people talking about, there's a ghost in that house, or that house is haunted. And oftentimes these spirits are suffering because you can imagine not knowing you're dead, you don't have a body, and you're maybe searching endlessly for your family or endlessly trying to get somebody's attention because you no longer have a body and can't do that. And so oftentimes these sorts of spirits will sometimes attach to other people trying to express themselves for that person's body kind of thing. But I'll give an example from my life. I don't know, do we still have time for that? But maybe I can.
Oh, yeah, we sure do.
Okay. So when I was in my shamanic training, I heard about this concept for the first time. And I'd heard of ghosts, but I didn't really give too much thought about that. But when they explained this idea that people who die suddenly, people who die in accidental deaths, sometimes linger here and need help transcending or moving on to the spirit realities where they can continue to evolve, etc., and also find relief and end their suffering. So I heard about this, and my own father had struggled with depression much of his adult life. And his mother had died in a house fire when he was just in graduate school. And I suddenly thought to myself, and she was a really unhappy person, had struggled with alcoholism and died in a fire smoking and drinking in bed. And I put two and two together, and I'm like, gosh, what if his mom could it be possible that his mom's spirit is still lingering here and maybe has attached to him somehow and brought this depression on? And so I asked my dad, would you be interested in going for a shamanic healing, or would you consider that? And he said yes. And so I connected him with another shamanic practitioner because I was just very new to this training, and I also knew that my dad was so close to me. I didn't think that was a good idea for me to work with him. But we went, and the shamanic healer that he went to found that his mother was still in that burning building. His mother's spirit was there, and a part of my dad was there. So it was a part of his soul was in that burning building with his mother. Through the trauma of knowing your mother has died in a fire, you can imagine a part of you might break away. Part of your soul might leave out of that just difficult experience. And so the shamanic practitioner brought my grandmother into the spirit realities, helped her move on, and then my dad really felt a lot better after that and had, you could just see it. And weeks later, I had a dream where my grandmother appeared, and she was in heaven, and she, shared with me. It was the most moving experience of my life, my entire life, probably the most moving dream I've ever had, where she showed up in my dream. So that's just an example of the power of this work and this idea of, sometimes spirits linger around, again, who have died in ways that often they just don't know that they're dead and they need help. And so you can read more about that. I don't have a lot of writing about that, but if somebody's listening and has a situation, I'd be happy to talk with them about that, and they could just send me an email or connect with me through my website.
Yeah, and talk with you about that there. Well, I think I have time for just another question here. During the time that you've done this, is there one beastie that shows up for you consistently, no matter what's happening? Would that be your core beastie, or is there another one that kind of just is like, hey, I'm here,
Yeah. Well, because I do this work every day with people, and this is sort of my life. I mean, some people will do this, for personal work, but I have so many. But one, Alice, my elephant, she's with me all the time, and I work with her when I work with clients constantly. So she's definitely a strong presence. But I also have a wonderful spider spirit who helps me with my writing and my teaching. So whenever it's funny, whenever I see spiders, I'm like, sometimes it's a reminder that, oh yeah, you've got that book you're working on, because I've got a new book I'm working on, and it's like, you better get back to that. And she's always there when I'm creating new content and new classes for people, and always just has the most amazing guidance. And that's the thing about working with the spirits, is that it's not sort of just this out there concept. I mean, it's very pragmatic. They have ways they can show you how to help others, how to help yourself. It's pretty incredible.
What are when you really communicate with the spirit animals and you develop this relationship, how has that changed your life?
Oh my gosh, it's just made it so incredible, because I think the Beasties really began to open that door for me to see that there's so much love and guidance everywhere we look, and so much beauty, and that it's just in everything and in everyone. And so, it's made me just really fall in love with the planet, fall in love with everything around me. I mean, from, I open my door and I smell that air, and I see my crabapple tree out in the yard, and it's just like, oh, life is good. So I think it's really brought me into this deeper state of gratitude and appreciation. Not to say that every day is, that I'm like, wow, life is great. I mean, there are days where I'm like, oh, I'm a human, but it's definitely, brought a deeper understanding and appreciation.
Well, Sarah, my goodness, your book, The Book of Beasties, is just such a profound book, and so are all the other books that you've written as well. Where can people connect with you and learn more about either making an appointment with you or your books and all the great stuff you do?
You can find me at followyourfeelgood.com. That's followyourfeelgood.com. Or you can find me at Facebook under Sarah Seidelmann, author. And I think there's another page for Sarah Seidelmann, Shamanic Healer, or something like that. But you can definitely find me online, and I'm posting quite frequently at Instagram and Facebook.
And people can make distant sessions with you for shamanic healings or shamanic work?
Yes. Yep.
I have to be in your neck of the woods.
Mm-hmm. You can book directly, and I work on Skype and phone, as well as, it's lovely if you can come to northern Minnesota and visit in person. But this work is not limited by time and space, so it's, it can be done at a distance as well.
Oh. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you, Marianne, for sharing your work.
Oh, well, thank you, Dr. Sarah. It has been such a joy to spend this time with you, and of course, to talk about your book, The Book of Beasties, your A to Z guide to the illuminating wisdom of spirit animals. The Book of Beasties is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, also at the Sounds True website. You can pick it up there, and all indie bookstores. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.